I mean, I honestly cannot think of a more non-essential job than yours right now, except for mine, maybe. I don't know. You want to host? You don't even exist. Two, three, four. Dee 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 dee. Dee 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 dee. Ba da ba 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 ba. It's Wednesday. We're all dead. Hi, everybody. My name is Jimmy. I went to the curb of the comic book store and bought some stuff. You want to see? Okay, sure. Picks of the week. Ba da ba da ba da. This is the last week of new comics shipping for the foreseeable future. I shop at Galaxy of Comics, which they're still selling books and they're still going to stay open and continue to sell books. It'll all be curbside, or they've also set up at the Humblebee Cafe, which is right across the street. I guess this only is relevant if you live in the Van Nuys area. What I'm getting at, though, is that you should support your local comic shop as much as you can. Obviously, this is a very difficult time for the nation as a whole. You know, the sort of thing that we haven't gone through since they canceled Night Court. You know, we all went through it together. But yeah, I understand money's a little bit tight. I certainly shouldn't be spending this money, but I also can't afford to not keep buying comic books, if that makes sense. So, I don't know, man. This is obviously very unprecedented, and I'm hoping that the comic book industry will come out of this, you know, at least on the other side. But again, as far as non-essentials go, I guess this counts. All right, so this week, among other things, I bought Punisher Soviet number 6. This is the final issue of this miniseries. And I know I had already talked about this before, but since it's the final issue, and I think it's the only final issue that I bought this week, like so many others, there's a lot of series that are just, now on hiatus. And so I'm just grateful to have the end of that, especially because it's been one of the best Punisher stories that Garth Ennis has ever written, and that's a very high bar indeed. As I think I discussed last time, and this was a couple months ago, so what difference does it make? One of the best things about Garth Ennis and his run on the Punisher is that when he first took over in the late 90s, that character was beyond its last legs. They had tried, because, the 90s were a bad time for superhero books, especially the mid to late 90s. So many books are getting, nobody gave a shit about superheroes anymore. Sorry for swearing. So what Ennis did was he really kind of took Frank's supporting cast and made them more character. Do you know what I'm not making myself very clear. Frank Castle as a character is kind of flat. His family was murdered by criminals. He murders criminals. That's about it. Now, Ennis has managed to plumb those depths, especially in series like Bourne, which I highly recommend if you haven't read. But, like I'm trying to say, he also gave Frank villains that had much more depth to them. There's an arc during the Max run called Up is Down and Black is White. I can't think of anything. Where Frank had already murdered most of the mafia on the eastern seaboard. There was one kid trying to make his way up, and he did so by unburying Frank's family and urinating on them on television. Pretty good way to go about it. But there was a whole issue in that arc where the Punisher doesn't appear at all. It's all Nicky Caravello. No. I think I was just about to name one of my friends. But I think Nicky Caravello is right. No offense to Nick Caravello, very funny and talented. All right, so blah, blah, blah. The Soviet book, he's doing the same thing. He's taken the Soviet character, Frank's Russian counterpart, and really built him up. And so I'm really looking forward to the thrilling conclusion of this. Like Life on Earth. I also got Road to Empire, the Kree Skrull War #1 for the big Marvel event that is not going to happen now, or at least not for a while. I finally came around on this. I'm obviously a big sucker for Marvel Comics, and so I usually buy whatever major crossover they're doing, and I think this was planned to be this year's, but then again, it is also subtitled Avengers Fantastic Four Empire, so it might just cross over into those two titles. There are a lot of attendant miniseries planned though, so yeah, this is probably the big Marvel event for 2020. And yeah, I've been getting a little burnt out on all the books that Marvel kind of expects us to buy. But what I try to keep in mind, what I think most of us should keep in mind, we don't have to buy any of this garbage. I also have the Marvel Unlimited app, so I can read all this stuff eventually if I want. But speaking of which, I did start to read the original Kree Skrull War again, and it got me all excited. So I was going to go all in on this crossover, which, I mean, I still could do if and when publishing starts happening again, but I don't know. I don't have a whole lot to add. I don't know a whole lot of the story going in. There was a miniseries from last year called Meet the Skrulls, which was a nice build up to it. There already has been, I think, a Road to Empire book somewhere along the line. But yeah, it's the Kree Skrull War. What more do you want? It's one of my favorite wars in the Marvel Universe. That's a good one. Okay. And that was Picks of the Week. Ba-da-be-dee-ba-doo. Picks of last week. Dee-dee-da-da-da-dee. Okay, so last week I read XRay Robot #1 by the Allreds. This was as much fun as I imagined it would be. It's written and drawn by Mike Allred, colored by his lovely wife Laura, and it's it's a lot of fun. It's about what you would expect, or certainly what I would expect from the Allreds. Our main character here has put his brain into this cyborg and sent it into the future, and they're now on a collision course with wackiness. So again, that will be fun to finish eventually. And then I also read Join the Future #1. Obviously, any sort of dystopian book is going to feel very on the nose these days. But yeah, this one in particular, the story revolves around a future where the cities have become complete utopias. Every need is met. Everyone is taken care of. There's no homelessness. There's no disease, blah, blah, blah. But of course, there's a darker side. And of course, there's a huge faction of Americans who are still staying rural. So that's where you get the nice blend of this rural vibe with the utopian future. Like I was saying last week, I mostly got this for Peter Kowalski's art, and it is killer, as I expected it to be. It's also written by Zach Kaplan, who I think last week I said I wasn't very familiar with. I did read Port of Earth, or at least the first arc, which is a book he did on Image, which I think was only his second book, so he is still kind of new to the whole thing. But a really good book. I just had to drop it when I, quit working at a shop and had to start paying for my comics like a prole. So, all right, well, that's picks on last week. All right, so goodbye forever? I don't know. No, I'm going to keep doing these videos as long as there are Wednesdays. There's not any more new comic book days for the foreseeable. There may not be any Wednesdays for the foreseeable, but until they are completely canceled, I'll keep doing these. And I will have recommendations for you. I'm going to go through Libby and Hoopla, the library apps, to find books that I've read that you would be able to check out for free. And also, I'm going to be bugging Warren down at my shop, Galaxy of Comics, for whatever sales or whatever else he's got going on for the week. So I'm trying to support them in whatever, to the 20 of you who watch this every week. If you have a chance to get to Van Nuys, yeah. But otherwise, definitely support your local comic shop. They're definitely going to fucking need it. Again, I'm trying not to swear on this thing. Also, we're circling the drain, so who gives a fuck, I guess, at this point. I'm sorry to have been such a bummer. But, I mean, again, I guess it doesn't really matter. So please continue to stay safe out there. Get some comic book reading in. I mean, why not at this point, right? It's the most fun. It's the second funnest thing I do every day now. And the first funnest thing I do is disgusting. You don't want to hear about it. So comics are very close second. Don't look at me like that. You still don't exist. All right. I will see you guys next week. Have a good one. 2, 3, 4. Ba-da-ba-ba-beep-ba-ba.